labor.
My husband will not watch that. I love it.
He stopped watching it, and then because he's just like, "What are you watching?" To my mom, he'd be like, "What are you watching? It sounds horrible."
Well, it's 12:35. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Welcome, everybody. This is the Clinical Consultation Network. As you know, we do this every Tuesday at 12:30 Central Time. So I'm so glad you could join us today. We've got a lot of great guest here with us today in Laura Greer, who is with Hamilton County Schools, and she is going to talk to us about the work she does as the homeless liaison down there. I'll introduce her a little bit more here in just a moment. But thank you so much for being here with us today, Laura.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
Next week, we've got our feature, our NAD feature. So this is our collaboration with the National Association for Dual Diagnosis that we'll be doing next week. And we have Dr. Jana Dreisner, a psychiatrist whom we all know, who is going to be our guest next week. And she is going to speak on serving the deaf population. On May 3rd, we have Aditya Rajaraman. Boy, I'll tell you what, I've got to practice these names a little bit more. Aditya Rajaraman, PhD, BCBA, board certified behavior analyst, is going to talk to us about trauma-informed approaches on May the 3rd. And then on May the 10th, we have Sandra Bishop, who is also going to talk to us about trauma-informed behavior management. So we're going to have a double feature there in the next couple of weeks or next few weeks involving trauma-informed approaches. So with that, I am going to move us along, and Carrie Donarajan has prepared our Get Smarticle for today. So I'm going to go ahead and let her do that, and then after that, we'll get into Laura's presentation. So Carrie?
Carrie had to take a crisis call and said she will be right back. Do you want to do introductions first, and then we can circle back to her?
All right, we will do that then. So I am going to do a little bit of a filler here. You said that we had some guesses on the change in my background.
We do.
Tell me about the guesses that are up there.
Okay, this one's not arrogant at all. It says, "I'm trying to reclaim my championship, the Texas Cup and the bobblehead Lincoln."
The Texas Cup. Okay, somebody said it was a Texas Cup. That's close. I'll give you credit because it is very difficult to see exactly what it is. But this is you could apparently see the outline of Texas in there, but this is a can of beer that I inherited from my father. It's never been opened. The top is a little bit bent, but it's from the bar Gillies. I don't know if any of you heard of that, but if you ever saw the movie Urban Cowboy back in 1978, it was all about this bar called Gillies, which was a huge country bar, and they had a mechanical bull in it, and John Travolta was in the movie, by the way. That's not impressive anymore, I guess. But nonetheless, he was in the movie. He was a mechanical bull rider, and this is a can of beer from that bar. So toast to everybody.
And it was Krishana Overstreet for the win.
Say again?
It was Krishana Overstreet for the win.
Krishana is on it. I'm telling you, she is very attentive and observant. So thank you, Krishana, for that. Yes, you got the bragging rights next week. And Carrie is back. So we're ready to get into our Get Smarticle, which we do every week. We do it some weeks. Some weeks we have a little something different we do. But this week, Carrie's got our Get Smarticle. So I'm going to let her take off and tell us about what she was able to find. Carrie?
All right, just trying to get all my parts correct here. Let's see if I can get in presentation mode. All right, I think, can you see that okay? All my things pop.
Yes,
all right.
I can see it.
Okay, all right, perfect. I'm not sure what mode it is in, but the Get Smarticle for today was, I tried to kind of pull in from our theme about, homelessness and residence type. So this is an article on the influence of residence type on personal outcomes by Carly Friedman. And the purpose of this study was to explore if and how residence type affects attainment of quality of life outcomes of people with IDD in the United States. And I thought what was, well, they had 1,341 participants, which I thought was a really nice sample size. The participants were broken up in residence type of 284 lived in their own home, 213 were in a family home, 677 were in a provider-owned or operated home, 43 in a state-operated HCBS group home, and 47 in an ICFDD private or state home, and then 51 were other, which included nursing homes. It also included homelessness. It included a lot of different categories there. So the instrument they used in the study was the personal outcome measures, and it was developed by the international nonprofit disability organization, the Council on Quality and Leadership. And the personal outcomes measure was actually administered in 3 stages, which included an interview with the person, which was like a couple of hours, and then an interview with the caregiver, and then observation. So I thought that was actually sounded like a pretty strong measure. So I thought that was a really interesting part of this study. And they analyzed the data to examine the following question: are there differences in residence types and impairment of severity that influence attainment of personal outcomes of people with IDD? So the dependent variable was the 5-factor score from the measure, and the independent variable was the residence type. So in looking at the outcome measures, I was curious, like, well, what are they actually looking at? But they looked at 5 things. One was my human security, my community, my relationships, my choices, and my goals. And so you can see some of the details there, but I thought that was just seemed like a very positive psychology measure. Oh, Janet, I'm sorry. I am not sure why it's on this view. Let me see if I can get it to fill your screen. Display settings, hold on. No, that did not make it better.
Having never seen that screen before, I can't advise you at all.
All right, hold on. I'm going to stop sharing and reshare because I know I can do this.
You can do this, Carrie.
Let me present first. I think I can do this. Well, now I can't share. All right, one minute.
Janet says these visuals are the size of a postage stamp, so she can't.
Oh, okay. Well, let's fix this. Let's fix this. All right, now I'm going to present. All right, how's that?
Looking good.
Yay! Okay, that's better on my end too. Okay, so you can see there. Then you'll be able to read what the things are under each factor. But those were interesting. So okay, so I'm going to kind of give the results in this graphic form, and it might not be super easy to see, but I love graphs. So you can see that top, well, the first set of results was that people with less significant impairment, which is represented by the solid line, showed an increase in the scale of my choices when they were in their own home, and that's at the bottom graph there. So you can see for the solid line, it was up at 1.4, but if you follow that line, it kind of goes down in the other types of residents. So there was a significant increase in my choices when people with less impairment lived in their own home. But for people with more severe impairment, you can see that their choices were better in their family home. So I thought that was an interesting difference between people that they had categorized as less severe or more severe in their
So the 2 solid lines, just make sure I understood correctly. 2 solid lines are people who were in their own home, and one was the lighter line. The gray line is the people who had less severe disability, and the other line, the black line, is the one with more severe. Yeah, I had it reversed.
Yes, the solid lines for both. I'm highlighting, if you can see me highlighting.
Yes.
That's the less severe. And down here is my choices, and up here is the results from my relationship. So you can see that people in a more severe category had higher, better relationships, more significantly better in the my relationship category.
Okay, I get you now.
Yeah. Does that make sense? I know it's hard to describe these graphs with all the little stuff, but I thought that was just interesting, and they compared. They were just trying to compare like severity level. But if we move forward to the next slide, oh, my annotations don't go away. That's a problem. Then stop annotating. There we go. These results are factored in consideration of the severity. They're not. They're weighted for. How do they say it? The severity is weighted for. This does not have to do with severity. I'm sorry, I'm not saying it correctly, but this is just the results that were significant. So there was higher security across severity for in a family home versus, let me get my annotation back out. So family home is here. So there was this security factor is this dark line here. I'm sorry. And think about how I describe this on here. But you can see that it's higher security in the family home, significantly higher.
Feel safer in your own home.
Yes, exactly. In the family home, there's also more community involvement. That was significant in the results than provider homes, HCBS homes, or ICF. There was, and in their own homes, that was significantly higher for people for this dark line in my community. Then even other, over here, this was also significantly higher. So even in my community, being other, which would mean maybe homeless, has more community involvement, and in your own home or in your family home than here. These are in the state homes. So I thought that was significant, like, or a provider agency or ICF or a state home. So that kind of makes sense. Yeah. People are getting less community involvement when they're in one of those categories of home. And so, but I think that's a significant finding. It plays into what some of their results were.
I think it is very significant. Hopefully that's something that Laura will be able to help us understand a little bit better too.
Yeah. And then I think another one that's significant is my relationships. The relationships in a family home also here, that light gray line was kind of overlapping, but that's also significant. Your relationships are going to be stronger if you're in your family home per this study result. And then an increase in choices. This last line is choices, and if you're in your own home, you have a significantly higher score on choice making. So I think that's also interesting. So hopefully I was able to capture sort of in that graph some of the significant findings that they saw. And they make a lot of logical sense. Their findings, like socially significant sense, but of course it's always important to have the data to sort of back that up. And what the study really was attempting to explore is, how that living situation impacts people's ability to meet their goals and have a more fulfilling life. And one of their conclusions, or the things that they discussed at the end of the study, was this idea of trans-institutionalization, and whether or not people who have left an institution but entered an ICF or provider home have been able to meet more quality of life goals, which I thought was a super interesting concept to talk about. And this was their conclusion straight from the study. Our findings suggest that although individual and family homes continue to result in the best possible quality of life outcomes of people with IDD compared to other settings, much of what has historically been considered deinstitutionalization of people with IDD may really be trans-institutionalization when it comes to provider-owned or operated settings. And many provider services have become standardized, inflexible, and unaccountable to those they serve, which I thought was a super interesting idea. And obviously this one study doesn't sort of solve that question, because there are a lot of reasons why people need those settings. When you consider the severity issue of some of the concerns. So they certainly, even in the study, they said, like, we're not saying people should return to institutions at all. Obviously, people's lives are better outside of institutions, and that's been proven in other research. But that we have to be really careful that when we do bring people out, we set those situations up so they can still be meeting their, quality of life goals.
That is,
So
I think that's super interesting. It has super implications for the whole discussion that we're going to be having today. In thinking about that, and by the way, transinstitutionalization has 26 letters in it. That may be the longest word I've ever seen. Maybe it has every letter in the alphabet. That's 26 letters. I don't think it has a J, though. I didn't see a J in there.
No, it has some repeats, but
that is quite a word. I'm going to use that more today. Before that, the longest word I knew was anti-disestablishmentarianism, and so this is a new record for me. But our guest today, thank you so much for that, Carrie. That was an excellent review of that article. It's a complex article to try to review there. Lots of different outcomes, but very good information. And our guest today is Laura Greer. And Laura works with the homeless population in Hamilton County. She's been serving as the homeless liaison for the Hamilton County School District for the last year and a half. Prior to becoming the homeless liaison, she worked at a local elementary school while pursuing her master's in school counseling. She has 11 years of case management experience working with foster care in the Choices program. She's from Chattanooga. She has 2 kids, one 18 and one 13, who keep her busy in her free time, and she likes to do it yourself projects like landscaping, camping, and other projects. So Laura, so happy to have you here with us today. Thank you for joining us on the Clinical Consultation Network.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
So you want to add anything to your introduction there, or tell us a little bit about yourself?
No, I know, I did work with when I in Chattanooga with some of the staff that were working with the DIDS program, and then when Choices left from Medicaid waiver, we kind of we would hold meetings with some of the staff that were with the DIDS program. So so I'm kind of familiar with some of that and all the activity of a daily living, and keeping people in their home and doing all those evaluations. So I used to do those for many, many years. So.
Okay. Well, that's great. Yeah, so it's good to have you here today. Have you been able to think of an interesting fact that you want to share with our audience today?
Oh my gosh, I had one and then I went blank. But I will tell. Babs had brought up earlier that she Googled me, and there will be another news article hopefully soon that I am working on to send to to a news station. So it might maybe redeem that first one.
Yeah. Well,
that stirred up a lot of controversy in our area. So.
Oh, okay. Well, so you are a controversial figure in Hamilton County.
Apparently. Apparently. Yes.
That's great. We love controversial figures on the Clinical Consultation Network.
Yes.
So I'm so glad to have you here today. With that, I'll turn it over to you and let you kind of take us through what you got, and I'll probably interrupt rudely periodically.
No, you're fine.
Too, but
you're fine. I'm going to share my screen. I will say I sometimes talk fast, so if you want me to slow down, just say, Laura, slow down. You're running 100 miles a minute.
While you're doing that, while you're bringing up your presentation, I will encourage our audience also to put in their questions and to ask questions that they'd like for you to answer in the chat box, or they can come on vocally if they prefer.
Yeah, however you guys want to do it. And then I will I'm not super great at monitoring a chat box at the same time. So
now, Babs is going to do that for us, Laura. So periodically I'll stop you and we'll get her to read off the questions.
Okay. And so I decided to use my PowerPoint that I created this year for our school counselors, just because you guys are in a clinical setting. So I felt like it might align more. And I chose to use one that's on homeless and unaccompanied youth, because I feel like y'all cover a larger range than just the school age population. So, my name is Laura Greer. Oh gosh, how do I do this? Okay. Sorry, I'm not, okay. So, these are the kind of the definitions that are under McKinney-Vento, which is a federal law. It was established, I think, in 1979. A lot of people aren't familiar with McKinney-Vento. I wasn't really until I started working in the school system and then took on this role. So for unaccompanied youth, they can be from age, we have some that are younger than 15, but normally they're about 15 to 24. And typically a 24-year-old is not school age, like elementary, like, or they're more of like a college age kid, but we still have programs that can help, and I'll tell y'all a little bit about that later. So for a student to be unaccompanied, they have to qualify as homeless or and then not be in the physical custody of their parent or the guardian, which shocked, like I found out this taking this role last year, that I was just amazed at how many kids and young adults that we have that are couch surfing and unaccompanied. I won't play the videos just to respect your guys' time, but I will, if Carrie wants to share the PowerPoint with anybody, you can access the link and go back and watch it on your when you need to. Let's see. Oh gosh, but I wasn't gonna do that. Okay. Okay. So for McKinney, the definition of homelessness for McKinney-Vento is different than HUD's definition. The definition is anyone who lacks a fixed, regular, or adequate house, like nighttime residency. It can be someone who's doubled up. I know the guidelines are a little different with HUD, but we consider anybody that's in like a hotel, motel, extended stays. They could be in a trailer park or a campground, and it just they have, or a shelter, cars, abandoned buildings. There are people who don't qualify that are in those, like a camp. Say you're in a campsite because you sold your house to make a large profit, but you haven't found your next home, that you wouldn't be considered homeless. So there are, there are some little details that we have to look through when we're making that determination. So it's kind of case by case on some of them. But so that's the overall federal definition of homelessness under McKinney-Vento. Sorry, this is not clicking. Okay. So the students and youth and young adults that would qualify as unaccompanied or homeless, they aren't in a private home by themselves. They are couch surfing. They bounce from one friend's couch to the next friend's or family members. I've already gone over like the cars and the public spaces. And then we have the migrant children whose families like move across the states to farm and do those things. And then also under them, we do have some students that are undocumented that are unaccompanied or homeless because they don't have a legal guardian and once they've come into the states. And so we have to look at all of those different situations as well. So for the definition of an unaccompanied youth, so it's when they're not in the custody of their parent or legal guardian. And it could be that their parent is incarcerated. They often have run away from emotional abuse, domestic violence, those kind of things. I have seen an increase in some of the LGBTQ population running away and finding, their own housing or support, even if they have established a place for themselves to live and they're paying for it, we can still qualify them as an unaccompanied youth because they may be at risk of losing that job or supporting themselves financially and need additional assistance. So I kind of mentioned the age restrictions earlier. For me, it's K through 12 students. But the state like the legal aid, I think for unaccompanied is up to 24. I personally will still work with my students who've come through the Hamilton County schools. Like I have a girl who's up north, who just got into college, was super excited, but she needed a FAFSA letter from me just to determine that she was still homeless and unaccompanied. So that's something that I will still offer some of my students that are locally, but for you guys that may have student or young adults that are going into technical schools or colleges that you're trying to work with, they can still get a FAFSA letter. They will, and all the colleges are supposed to have a homeless liaison as well. It may be a challenge to locate who it is, but often they have one. And Vanessa Waters is our state coordinator for the McKinney-Vento, and she's in Nashville as well.
So you work for the entire Hamilton County school system, right?
Yes.
So now, do you have relationships with the whole group of people though that are identified as homeless, or do you work through other staff in the schools? How does that work?
Yes, and both, a little bit of both. So I use the social workers a lot. They do most of the forms when we identify a family or a student. So the social workers will often find students who are homeless, and then they'll bring them to me. Sometimes the school counselors will reach out to me. I have found the older students that are unaccompanied have preferred to talk directly with me. So I'll reach out to them and kind of get a game plan for what we're going to do as their next step. I don't really have, the unfortunate part is we don't really have housing options right now for our unaccompanied youth, especially from like ages 15 to 18, because if they don't have children, then they can't get into some of our shelters here because they have to have children. If they don't have documentation, then they can't get into certain shelters. So there are some, limitations on what all we're able to do as far as services for them.
And you may be getting to this in a later slide, but how many kids are there in the school system that meet these conditions that you've outlined?
The report that I ran a couple weeks ago, we had a little over 1,400 students already identified this year. That is an increase. Last year at the end of the school
Very
year,
high.
it's very high. Yeah, it's high. And my data entry person will be putting more in soon. And I still don't, even only being, in this for my second school year, I still don't feel like the numbers, I feel like we're still under identifying our families, just because so many people aren't aware of like what the McKinney-Vento definition is, and there's a lot of stigma around the word homeless and homelessness. So I prefer to refer to it as families in transition, or in transitional living situations. It just kind of, they don't feel as, it's not as much of a stigma
It,
as if you're
it's
homeless.
yeah.
Yeah, because I've had families that were in hotels. They're like, well, we're not homeless. I mean, we have a roof over our head, and I'm like, but this isn't a stable housing, situation. So I just try to mostly frame it as, you have these rights, and for you, your student and parents have educational rights and are covered under this law, and then families tend to open up more. So that would be something you guys might want to be mindful of, like when you are like approaching that situation with a
That's
client.
very good information because I wouldn't, I guess maybe I would have thought that people might try to deny being homeless. I
Mhm.
mean, because it's not something that a lot of people probably feel real proud of.
Right.
So probably a good reframe.
Right. Yes. Yes. Yeah. We've had several people that are even this year that have, done that. And then once they kind of, talk to me more, they're like, oh, okay. well, then let's do this, because there's so many things that we can help them with. In my district, I'm not sure exactly what every other district is doing.
Yeah.
So yeah. Let's see. What age y'all serve? What ages 6 to up? Is that right?
Yeah, in varying programs. Actually, we kind of serve. You could probably argue we serve people from birth on up because we have the TEIS program through the IDD, which serves kids 0 to 3. So
And Katie Beckett?
and then Katie Beckett waiver. So yeah, we go all the way.
Okay.
This is Janet. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When you say 1,400 students, are these all unaccompanied? Because then you started talking about families living in hotels. Are they with parents? I guess I'm just not clear as to who all you're encompassing in your work.
Right. Sorry, I just clicked something. No, it's families and unaccompanied. So they all fall up under that one umbrella. So they could be unaccompanied or they're homeless.
So it's either one, not both conditions together.
Well, they
can be
can
both
have
conditions
they
together.
they can have both conditions. But the bulk of the students that are on in our data are doubled up, like they're living with other family members. I see a lot of doubled up, and then I see a lot of hotels. Our shelters right now are very limited on their capacity that they're taking. So most of our homeless families or unaccompanied youth are doubled up or in a hotel. So I know it's a little confusing because the PowerPoint that I put together for my high school counselors is geared more towards like homeless and unaccompanied youth because they're older, and the services, and I'll get to that later, there's more services that I've been able to offer them over the last year. So and then because it all kind of trickles down to elementary grade age too. And then I will share something that we have working on in the Southeast area for ages 18 to 24. So, and then I'll save you the 13-minute slide or video. Okay, so when they're on their own and they're living on their own, I kind of already touched on why they might be unaccompanied. Like dysfunctional families, the substance abuse. We in the Chattanooga area, we have a lot of single single pregnant moms that are homeless right now. So, and then they run away. We have students that are aging out of foster care and they run away. One thing about foster care too is they have some rights under the foster care where we can like drive them to bus them to their school of origin and those kind of things. So that way they're not having to bounce around as much. So these are the rights of unaccompanied and homeless youth or students. They're all the same for parents and for students. So they have the right to get the services through McKinney-Vento, no matter what led to their situation. We have families that have been evicted for financial reasons. A lot of it's COVID related right now. We have families that are just, they lost their home to fire. We had a tornado a couple of years ago that wiped out a lot of families. Lately, I think this last month, we've already had 4 or 5 families just from house fires or apartment fires. So we're able to work with those families as well. And then you're all kind of familiar with the dynamics of different families and their dysfunctions. So I try to encourage staff and everyone to just be sensitive to that and not like re-traumatize students, by bringing stuff back up. And so what I have found is sometimes in the schools, some of the staff are a little territorial, like school counselors may not want the college and career advisor talking to kids about what's going on. But I try to I'm like, if they are comfortable with that one person, just let them have that relationship and then refer them to me for other services. So, because we just don't want to hurt our students any more than they already have been. So, and then so for our unaccompanied youth and our homeless students, they have the right to enroll immediately. So if you have any clients that don't have their immunization record, they don't have their birth certificate, or they don't have a guardian, or they are still 18 to 22 in high school, and they don't have a guardian to sign off on anything because they're of legal age, then you would reach out to your homeless liaison, because we can help get them enrolled immediately, because schools should not be denying enrollment for any reason. They should, the law is that we enroll them immediately, and then if we need to go back and look at, are they being truthful about their status, those kind of things, and get the documents like proof of residency and those items later, we will. I don't know what every district in the state does, but like Chattanooga, like Hamilton County, we are a zoned school district. So, we have a lot of schools that get worried about protecting their school zone and everything like that. And then they get the email from me that says to go ahead and let them in, and we can figure out the rest later.
If they need consent for something like a permission slip or something like that signed, or who signs that? Who is the consentor?
That's kind of for us in our county. It's really up to the local LEA, the school the school district. If they're 18 or over, they can sign their own documents. If they're unaccompanied, I encourage, to let them sign their documents. Some of our unaccompanied students are that don't have a caregiver, we do have a caregiver form, so they could fill that out. Because often it is hard to get like dental work and healthcare and those kind of things for some of our students that don't have a guardian. But if the school would not let them go because they didn't have a form signed, I would sign it for them. But what I talked to our high school counselors was, they're 18, they should be able to sign themselves out. If they're living on their own under 18, I mean, they shouldn't have to call their abuser to come sign out, or whatever their situation is. So it kind of varies from, I think, county to county. So,
I have a question.
Okay.
If they're unaccompanied and they'd like to get a COVID-19 vaccine, what is the protocol for that?
That's a good question, because I know when my son was 17, he could go by himself and do it. But I don't know. I've never had that question asked. That's a good question.
Yeah, that is maybe a little bit of a loaded question there. It's been under some controversy about that.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, but it is, I think people have found ways to get it done one way or another if they want.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and I know like our school district is offering, like get your shots for whatever ages in a couple weeks. But I don't know. I've not ever had that asked as a question. But I can look into that and find out, because unaccompanied youth have rights too. So, and if they want to get the shot, they can get it, I guess. You can go at 17, I think, and get, or 16 or 17, I think, and get it.
Actually, it's 14.
Is it 14? Okay. So yeah, but like I haven't had any students that have asked me to help them with that, or social workers or anybody. So if I, did, our school nurses have been doing them for us when we do like the shot drives. So I don't know if they would be able to do them at the school or not at this point. Yeah. Okay, so these are just kind of, and this applies to everything. So there's a lot, like the lack of understanding about McKinney-Vento and the definition of homelessness, and that it's broader than many are aware of. And like we have already talked about, the stigma, the difficulty talking about their personal situations and things like that. And then a lot of students, all ages, not just unaccompanied, they have a fear of being treated differently by school personnel or other students, just because kids can be mean sometimes, and pick on other kids for if their clothes are dirty and those kind of things. So even where I'm working on training for staff, like for school bus drivers and cafeteria workers, because we have had some school bus drivers be like, "You're that homeless kid in the hotel," and then we're like, "Oh my gosh, you can't say that." So there's a level of confidentiality with homelessness. You don't want to bring attention to it or treat the students any differently, because legally we're not supposed to, but also we want to give them respect in this difficult situation that they're already in. Also, we have a lot of parents who are worried about reporting that they're homeless or need help because of like CPS involvement. But while we are mandated reporters, for me, it's up to my discretion on some of the cases. So for our students that are running away from domestic violence, we have to, I staff it with a group of people, and then if I need to take it to the state representative, I will, because often if you were to report a child who ran away from a domestic violence situation, they may run again, and then they're going to be lost, in the system. We may not ever find them. So I tend to err on, let's get more details, see if the student is safe for the moment, and if the circumstances change, then we will make a CPS report if needed. But I have been finding that in the last couple, like, we've had several students age 15 and up that CPS has not done anything to take them into custody or anything like that. So, oh wait, what am I doing? Sorry, I started clicking the pictures instead of the, okay. So I kind of talked about the enrollment. So a student, like I said, can enroll themselves by, without a guardian, or someone who's acting as a guardian who does not have legal custody. They can enroll them, as well. And if we need to if they need to get guardianship or power of attorney, they can. So I have that caregiver affidavit that I can provide to some of the schools. If some of them will go ahead and enroll them, but some of them prefer to have a form as well. So I'm the local liaison. I'm waiting from my HR department about, oh gosh, I'm clicking backwards. How do I go back? Sorry, y'all, I'm not very good at the PowerPoint on Google.
We all often have problems with this technology. So.
Well, if I clicked the right one, but now I can't go back. Let me exit my full screen and go back over here. Okay. Sorry. So I will be having some school level liaisons. That way, my goal is to get them at least in the high schools, because I feel like that's where our largest population is being under identified. Because kids, are embarrassed to say something or scared they're going to get taken away or reported or those kind of things. So, so we will have like social workers and school level liaisons in our schools to help with this as well. So there is immediate enrollment for student if they have no caregiver or paperwork. I think I've already talked about, talking with a staff member that you're comfortable with. So supporting our homeless and unaccompanied youth. So what that looks like for my school district, we've started food boxes. We get a delivery from the food bank every month. This is something our social workers have started. We organize the boxes, and then we can hand them out to any families in need. I have a little food pantry here at my office. We did a prom project this year. So we partnered with a local lady who's been giving out prom dresses for 5 years. And so we've been able to like give out prom dresses and pay for their tickets. So I've really been working on trying to get the experiences for the students and young adults that they would not normally have, just to kind of give them some normalcy and, you know, removing those barriers. It just seeing some of the girls get their dresses and how excited they were, it was just really, really neat. So we will do this summer, we're going to start our college and technical school tours for homeless students. We'll help with the dual enrollment and technical school fees. We're going to have driving. We'll partner with Hayman's Drive-In School, and we help with tutoring. One thing too we're going to have is the Uber cards, gas cards for families and for unaccompanied youth that need transportation to and from activities or school or events. And I'm working with our local bus service in Chattanooga for some bus passes. I know Nashville has a really good bus program that I would like to incorporate for our students. So I've kind of passed that on. And then I've talked about the school level liaisons. We were able, many areas in the state were able to apply for the ARP homeless grants. I don't know if anybody is familiar with that, but those are extra funds that they put out for because of COVID. And so now I've been able to start adding some of these extra activities for young adults and homeless students. And because, you know, I felt like our high school students were kind of lacking on what we were able to offer. That's kind of been my mission, because often they don't have cell phone service or, you know, transportation and those kind of things. So, and I really, you know, wanting to get them into like a technical school or secondary, you know, education is important for them in their lives. So for our homeless youth, you know, we'll help them, you know, prepare for college and pay for their placement fees, entrance exams and college applications. Often the colleges will waive those fees, or technical schools for McKinney-Vento students. They still have to apply for FAFSA. They don't get, you know, college paid for unless they, you know, get like the grants and things like that. But we give the students who are homeless, whose parent, even if they aren't unaccompanied, like if they don't have, you know, their parents' birth certificate, like things like that they need, we can do the FAFSA letter to help them apply for FAFSA for their school. So, and then there are some other scholarships I found out about through like the homeless, like the National Homeless Agency. And the website's there. So once you get the PowerPoint, you'll have access. You can click on that. But the NCHE, they have a great website that I pull most of my information on. They have one just like they have an article just about rights and education for homeless and unaccompanied youth. They have them, you know, for all families and students, and it's just got some good information about like who qualifies as homeless and those kind of things. So okay, you don't need to know that. Okay, so here are some of these might be something that you were, you know, kind of touching on about like who can sign for what. So these are some of the most like popular questions I've had, frequently asked questions I've had lately about our young adults who don't have a guardian and like who can sign for different things. So our attorney has said, you know, if they can be counted as a dependent on the parents' taxes, they have a guardian. You know, but they can be counted on their taxes, but they also can still be unaccompanied. Just having a guardian doesn't mean that the student is homeless. it's more on their living arrangements. Like I had a unaccompanied youth at my house last semester. My son's friend was living there because he left his house. So I still worked with his parents and things like that. But his living arrangements, he was not with his legal guardian. Yes, so we have had some 18-year-olds that aren't living with their parents and they don't want their parents to know anything about them. So if they request not to have information given out, it doesn't always mean that we won't. If they're 18, we can remove, we don't remove it unless they're 18, but because we have to be able to find a contact if there's an emergency, and those kind of things. We have had, if they're not in the physical custody, like parents, that they don't have any rights. So we have to share, information with the parents unless they are 18. Okay, here's that one about the legal documents. So they can't sign legal documents, but the caregiver can sign it or give them permission to sign themselves out of school. So if they didn't have a caregiver and they were living on their own, then it would probably end up being me. I haven't had to do that yet. But I have had to appeal to expulsions of 2 of my students that didn't have a caregiver or a legal guardian in the picture. And so I did do that. I kind of serve as their advocate.
And I have seen circumstances where a social worker through child protective services might be serving in that capacity.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we do have some situations where if a student or a young adult was in foster care before, they've been able to sign themselves back in and get some of those extra services through the foster care system as well. So here's and I have not updated these dates, so I'm sorry. But here's the thing I was talking about earlier. So the Southeast Tennessee area, we have a $2.2 million grant that is just for homeless and unaccompanied young adults ages 18 to 24. So that, may help some of your population in that age range. So we are going to be doing like surveys with the high schools. We did one last year with one of our high schools, but we are still working on the program pieces, and this is not through the school district. This is through the Chattanooga Homeless Coalition has started this grant. We have Young Adult Advisory Board. We call it our YAB, and they have created a program that will help, meet the needs of the 18 to 24-year-old population experiencing homelessness. And they all have lived experience. So I think it's going to be a really great thing once it is in place, because they'll be able to help with like coordinated entry, rapid rehousing, and then work on long-term housing. And so that, if you have any 18 to 24-year-olds in your caseload, that might be something in my area that you might want to look into. So we just submitted the final draft for the program planning to HUD. I think it was last week they submitted that. So and that will cover the Southeast Tennessee area, I think, in northern Georgia.
Okay, that's great. Babs, do we have any audience questions that we can bring up in this last minute or so?
Yes, we have. One is, Laura, can we have your email address? I'm assuming there it is. So when I send out the presentation, they'll have access to that. Another one is, does McKinney-Vento cover emancipated youth?
Yes.
Okay. And then the third one is, do you know what proportion of homeless unaccompanied youth in Hamilton County schools have IDD? And it might be easier to ask how many of them are in special education, which is close but not exactly the same question.
Right. I've never run that. I've not run a report on
Do you have
what.
a sense of like that there are a great number or a small number of those that are people with IDD?
I know and it could be any learning, disability, those kind of things. I know 3 of my homeless students that come to the site that I'm at right now working from. We have a graduate success program, which has a small, class trying to get kids, graduated through high school. 2 out of 3 of those have IEPs. And one of them he finished his last class today and he's 21. So,
Okay.
and the other student is 19. So,
We know they're out there.
mhm.
A lot of times we don't have that much contact with them, although one of our programs, the Assessment and Stabilization Team program that we operate, our eventual goal is to serve all people with disabilities. We're
Mhm.
currently serving people who are in services, but we hope to eventually serve people who are not in services, including those that are homeless. So
Right.
just, we're trying to get all the information we can on that.
Well, and one thing, that wasn't on this presentation, just because it was more geared towards like the older students, is
Right.
we do help with transportation. So if a student should not have to change school of origin, they should be able to stay at their school of origin, even if it's outside of our county. So I have students that are bused or using taxi services from Georgia. We've had them from like Sequatchie County and Cleveland coming down. So students should stay at their school of origin because it's in their best interest. They'll get free and reduced lunch, dress code, uniforms, school supplies. All of those things are things that we provide to our students with our McKinney-Vento funds. So your clients could, if they're in that homeless situation, they would benefit from some of that as well.
Laura, thank you so much for being our guest today. We really appreciate you coming on and telling us all about the programs you operate. I think I've learned a lot from just understanding more about how you work with them. And so appreciate you so much for being here today.
Yeah, no problem. And then I'll send Carrie my other, the foster care, juvenile, and like McKinney-Vento one that kind of has more of our like the legal stuff and what I present to the schools. That way you can kind of have both as well.
All right, very good. Thank you so much. And thank you all for
you.
being here today. This is the Clinical Consultation Network. We do this every Tuesday at 12:30. Next week, it's Dr. Jana Dreisner, who is going to talk about her services to persons who are deaf. And so we invite you to be back with us again next week. That's our big NAD collaboration, National Association for Dual Diagnosis Collaboration, that we'll be doing next week. So join us again next week for another fascinating episode of the Clinical Consultation Network. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Laura. Great to see you all today.